China is battling damage control to its reputation in light of the coronavirus pandemic, the trade sanctions on Canada, and the crackdown on Hong Kong protesters. Joining me now is a professor from Edmonton who knows a thing or two about the Asian nation. Gordon Houlden is the director of the China Institute at the University of Alberta. Welcome to BCN, Dr. Houlden.
Thank you, Hal.
Now, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney tweeted that he was shocked to learn that China had arrested Martin Lee, founder of the Hong Kong Democratic Party, who's a personal friend of his. Chinese authorities also returned the tweet, rebuking Kenney and basically telling him to stay out of China's affairs. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it was a mistake to arrest Martin Lee. This is a legend of promotion of democracy in Hong Kong. I've known him for 25 years. I called on him last November when I was in Hong Kong. He's a remarkable gentleman. He speaks English with a British accent. He did his law studies in Britain. He battled the British for greater democracy in China and now has been battling the Chinese since 1997. They picked the wrong target, absolutely.
Now, while the world grapples with COVID-19, it seems that China has used this opportunity to arrest pro-democracy leaders in Hong Kong. Why does China fear the one country, two systems agreement?
Well, I think that there was always ambivalence in China about the one country, two systems. I think that Deng Xiaoping, when he was around, was willing to make that concession because he knew that China really badly needed Hong Kong, its financial clout, its technology, its ability to promote business within China itself. It needs Hong Kong a little bit less now, but it is especially afraid of a Hong Kong that will be too outspoken, too much willing to push the envelope, and perhaps even encourage other Chinese in the Chinese mainland to want the same advantages that Hong Kong has.
Do you believe that there's any hope for democracy to flourish in Hong Kong, or do you expect it will continue to deteriorate? In other words, what options do the people of Hong Kong really have?
Well, I think what Hong Kong still has is important. They have a considerable measure of freedom of the press, absolutely critical. Hong Kong newspapers regularly criticize China and the Chinese leadership. They have freedom of religion, freedom of gathering, and they can speak their minds. None of those things can happen on the Chinese mainland, so that still matters. However, what the activists, a lot of the people want, is a thorough democracy, the right to elect their own leadership. They have a bit of that, but not that much, and I don't think that they get much more.
What about the extradition of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou? Now, if she is extradited to the United States, what do you expect China's response will be, and why is she still here after all this time?
Well, I think that the wheels of Canadian justice grind very finely but very slowly. I've worked when I was in government on an extradition request for a major criminal out of Vancouver, someone we wanted to send back to China. It took us 11 years. He had good lawyers and made appeals right to the Supreme Court. Now, I hope that this case does not last as long, but we know now already that it will not be wrapped up before the fall. And that doesn't even take into account the appeals process. The justice supervising the extradition hearing has yet to render a verdict. When that's done, the appeals process opens. Now, if the judge says no case, then Madame Meng will go back to China directly, and that will be over. And I presume the two Michaels might be freed shortly thereafter. But if she is consigned for extradition in the United States, she can have appeal process, which can go up to the Supreme Court. Could take a couple of years at least.
Now, still with the topic of Huawei, should Canada think twice before allowing them to participate in building our 5G network?
I think we certainly should think twice. But it's not necessarily quite an easy matter as it might look at first glance. We pay some of the highest data rates in the world, and we've got a set of companies that have equipment that's good quality, etc. Huawei's got good quality equipment that's much cheaper. So it's a real dilemma for the providers. What we do need is a decision fairly soon, because if we're not going to be one of the last countries to get 5G, they need to get started. The alternatives are Siemens, which is an Alcatel. These are options, but that takes time. Their equipment's more expensive. They need to get started. So I think a decision is overdue. If it is to include Huawei, that is the decision, if it is to include Huawei, we better be very careful to make sure that there's lots of security safeguards built into the system before we go forward.
Now, two Canadians are still being detained in China, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Many believe this is in reaction to the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive. If it is, why does China believe this will really work?
Well, I think there's no doubt in my mind. The timing of the arrest of these two individuals is such that there can be no doubt that this is retaliatory measure taken by China. Can do things there that we can't do here. We can't simply arrest a random Chinese national because one of our Canadians have been arrested in China. We just don't work that way. Their system allows that sort of flexibility, if you wish, where they can take what we would consider extrajudicial measures to detain someone in retaliation for something else that's being done. Um, I'm not optimistic at all that the two Michaels will be freed until unless the Madam Meng case has been dealt with. And China will stick to its guns, in my view, will not waver. The conditions may improve. I'd like to see that immediately. She's not even under house arrest. During daylight hours, she can roam the city. She has two mansions. She can go shopping, meet with friends. I mean, COVID-19 make a bit of an exception, I suppose. She can live a more or less normal life, a leisure in Vancouver. Our guys are locked up in a Chinese jail. And I've been in Chinese jails, not as a prisoner, but as a consular officer visiting Canadians who've been detained. And this is no picnic. It's hard time.
Yeah, well, how would you actually compare a Chinese jail to a North American jail? What are the big differences?
I'd rather be in a Canadian jail for sure. One of the things that's also characterizes Chinese jail is they make a great effort of a mental pressure on you to confess and to reform. And so there's a lot of coercion that goes into that. Plus, our guys went through good 6 months of interrogation by the Ministry of State Security. That's a particular branch that focuses on the equivalent of the FBI, I suppose you could say, or CSIS. And they were in confinement, the lights on 24/7, never alone in solitary confinement, but always with a guard sitting just outside the bars of the cell watching them. Now they're out of that now. Interrogation phase is finished, but this is tough time. Um, you'd have to look at our maximum security jails to find something equivalent. And I think that the food stuffs and the entertainment, none of that we may have to some degree in our jails would be found there. It's just tougher.
Now, the trade wars continue between Canada and China. China's been blocking exports of our canola and other goods for a while. It was the beef and the pork. How can a country like Canada respond in such a way that it'll actually make a difference?
Very difficult. We're 37 million people. They're 1.4 billion. We have an economy that is large, a couple trillion. They've got one which is perhaps 18 trillion, depends how you count it, closing rather steadily on the United States to be the world's largest economy. And we matter somewhat to them, but they can live without us much more easily than we can live without them as a market. We are more dependent on their market opportunities, even though they sell more here than we sell to them. Canada is a relatively minor consideration in their calculations, in my opinion.
So, Professor Houlden, do we know on average how Canadians actually view China right now?
We track that fairly carefully, and my institute, China Institute at the University of Alberta, has in the past tracked quite carefully the views of Albertans as well towards China. And on both those groups, Canadians in general, Albertans, there's been a deterioration. Well, that began before the two Michaels and before COVID-19, neither of which improved standing. And in fact, after the detention of the two Michaels and the Chinese economic retaliation, views became already negative, but they came more so. And COVID-19 has not helped either. I haven't seen the most recent polling, but it's not pretty seen from a Chinese perspective. So it has gone down. It can't go down all that much further, quite frankly. When you have a bad rating, you can only go so much lower. And so at some point, it would begin to rise normally. But right now, it is in the doldrums, to be sure.
Do you think that China actually cares how Canada and the rest of the Western world actually view their country?
I think they do. That doesn't mean that they will then do or become what we wish they would do or we wish they were like. They do care a lot about the United States. The United States is their big rival. It's a major economic power. They care about about Europe, the EU as a group, and they care about the assembly of third world nations. And we are a country, they also care about public views here. I speak to the embassy regularly. They're unhappy about the coverage they get, etc. But they don't care enough that they're going to take measures which they don't believe are in their interests.
Now, China is going to be a big election issue in the U.S. presidential race between Trump and Biden. How much of an issue do you think it'll be in the next Canadian federal election?
Very hard to know. I think that election's a fair ways off. And it's hard to know what will be the driving issues in that election. In general, as you know, well, elections in Canada very seldom turn on a foreign policy issue. I think Diefenbaker um, was one exception, and certainly the free trade agreement, the NAFTA agreement was an election issue. But in general, turns on economic issues, things that are closer to home. But to the degree to which there is a foreign policy issue, China will matter. The views of the government will be examined closely by the opposition, and there'll be a range of views. But I think you'll find it might not quite be as important as people think, because most are critical, and it'll be the opposition parties perhaps saying the government is too gentle on China, the government saying no, they're not, etc. It's too early to know if that'll really be an issue that bites, but the degree to which foreign policy plays, China absolutely.
U.S. President Donald Trump and others believe that China has far too much influence and control over the World Health Organization. What are your thoughts?
Well, they certainly have a great measure of influence. So does the United States, although U.S. has now cut funding and is at odds with the WHO. Here I've got mixed views. The WHO, particularly for a smaller country like Canada, we really need their expertise and their intelligence. And by that I mean their surveillance system they run internationally, whereby viruses and diseases that are picked up in any one of the world's countries are reported to Geneva and then distributed to member countries. So maybe the U.S. could get along with the WHO. I think we'd have greater difficulty, but certainly WHO ought not to be concerned about offending China or offending the U.S. or offending Canada for that matter. I like it when these international organizations are not afraid to speak their mind and to be open and transparent, but we need them.
Many people believe that the coronavirus originated at a lab in Wuhan, China, and now, ironically, Canada is getting some of the personal protective equipment, or PPE, and other medical supplies from China. I don't know about you, but there is some irony there, isn't there?
There's a lot of irony there. I think it's unsettled yet precisely where the virus originated. I'm confident it wasn't a bioweapon or something done deliberately. Where it came from in southern China remains to be seen. I was in Beijing during SARS, working at the embassy and responsible for our response. Beijing and Hong Kong, Taipei and Toronto, those are the four cities that were most hard hit. But the disease we know originated in Guangzhou and Guangdong province in southern China. And I think it's too early to know. What would help would be an independent international body, including Canadians, perhaps with WHO involved, but with highly credible scientists from the world, including the United States, including Canada and others, expertise being the reason to be included, to get down there with full access and to dig around doctor to doctor, expert to expert, not to party officials, and find out the answer. I think we will know the answer eventually. It's very hard to hide these things for too long. I think it'll turn out to have been accidental. China got a lot of damage as well, not just the reputation to their economy, shrank in the first quarter of this year for the first time since the 1970s. So I think we need answers. I wish I knew with precision. I think we will get that answer, even if it takes a while.
Professor Gordon Houlden, Director of the China Institute at the University of Alberta, thanks for joining me today from Edmonton.
Thank you very much, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.